Opening day is here, and there's early season storylines to talk about with the Pittsburgh Pirates. We're going to preview the Pirates Red Series over the weekend and a bunch more here on the Locked On Pirates podcast.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. My name is Ethan Smith, the host of that Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And as always, on Thursdays throughout the entirety of the 2023 season, and probably beyond at this point, we have Craig Toth joining us today here on opening day. Craig, as I told you before we started recording, I could barely sleep last night. I got my coffee right here. Opening day is here, man. It's always a great day, and it should be a national holiday. But how are you today, sir?
Dude, I'm a kid on Christmas morning. This is like the best time of the year for me. We've been waiting, and I think I said before, maybe here or maybe on my podcast, this spring training just seemed to drag on because it's the first real, legit spring training that we've had since 2019. Mm-hmm. So just waiting for opening day. It's here. I wish that it was in Pittsburgh, or that I wish I was in Cincinnati. One of the times I would actually wish to be in Cincinnati. But dude, I am going to be sitting at Patrick's Pub with my kids, getting ready to watch the game, dinner with the wife. I don't think I'm going to be able to work all day.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, we already had an episode come out today here at Locked On Pirates podcast with Jeff Carr and Stephen Offenbaker over at Locked On Reds. You guys know the wager that I have going on today with Stephen, so hopefully Ethan does not have to do an episode in Reds gear in the foreseeable future. We'll see all that, but that's going on. But we have a very fun series on tap here with the young stars that we have to watch this weekend and all that other stuff, but we'll get into that a little bit later because there's already some storylines building into this Pirate season, and they haven't even thrown a first pitch yet. Obviously, and I'm not going to talk about it at length, you have the Brian Reynolds stuff. At the time of recording with me and Craig, nothing new has happened. It's just business as usual right now. Nothing has happened yet. So we're not going to talk about that too much, but that's obviously one of the bigger storylines. But then you look at what I would consider the biggest storyline already heading early into the season is that you already have 3 pitchers on the injured list probably going into the season, which has not been officially announced, but it's basically implied at this point that Harleen Garcia, Robert Stevenson, and JT Brubaker are all going to be on the injured list to begin the year. And when we were doing everything in the offseason, Craig, everybody was saying, oh, the starting pitching staff looks good. The bullpen's looking okay. And also go check out Bucs in the Basement with Craig and Gary's story on their season preview where they gave grades to every single position. It was very good and in-depth. So it's a very good thing to figure out what you're going to be looking for the Pirates this year. But now with these injured list stints, the way we look at the starting pitching staff, I think, is going to almost be completely different than how we were looking at it before. Because at first, with this Brubaker news, it felt that Johan Oviedo was just kind of a placeholder, and then he'd maybe slide over to the bullpen or slide back down to AAA. Now he might be a mainstay. So, Craig, how do you think that this is going to play out early in the year with some of these guys that we once thought were going to be staples in the pitching staff that might not even be here at all for quite some time?
Yeah, and JT Brubaker, it's hard to hear for him. We don't know exactly, what is going on. There's been some, rumblings that this could be a long-term injury. I look at this and I just kind of I get frustrated for him, but then I also just get frustrated for what the pitching staff looked like in the beginning. You have, obviously Mitch Keller, he's going to be coming out. And then you have, Rich Hill, Vince Velasquez, and now you have, Oviedo and Rowe thrown in there. But the big thing for me is that, Roansy Contreras not built the whole way up because he was at the World Baseball Classic, and he may not have been built the whole way up. We've seen even in spring trainings the past few years, guys, only being able to go 4 innings at most. I was almost looking as Oviedo as possibly making the team, but also maybe just being, I think I called him the regular piggyback, where he would just
Yeah.
kind of come in if Rowe needed a little bit of a break, if Velasquez struggled, whatever it would be. But I mean, you're losing at least for, I mean, it's looking like at least a 60-day IL. You're losing the person who's been the biggest mainstay in this rotation
Mhm.
for the past 3 seasons. He has,
Yeah.
the most innings over the past 3 years, for the Pirates combined. It's around like 315, a little bit over that innings. And as much as, JT has struggled with the home run, if you look at his numbers, and I was just pulling them up this morning, over those 3 years, a 1.384 whip, the 4.99 ERA is not great. But I mean, everybody, if you go to the FIP, a 4.43, that's a number 5 for a rotation, and it's a guy that has consistently pitched and that you could count on. So at this point in time, I mean, I look and I'm just like, what if Oviedo struggles? What if Velasquez struggles? It was the easy move to put somebody in the bullpen,
Mhm.
if you had other people. And now, I mean, I don't know if Luis Ortiz is ready. He's kind of struggled. He's working on that third pitch, not guaranteed, to go the length of a starter.
Mhm.
You had made a decision for a Carmen Majinski to start out in the bullpen, a Cody Bolton to start out in the bullpen. And just with, I mean, talking about Gary and I had talked last night, and he had tweeted out this morning. He's like, everybody saw Osvaldo Bido pitch, during spring training and perform fairly well. You also have Hang, the Chinese pitcher that we had picked up. Those might be the guys, and that's gonna number one. That's gonna cause Pirates Twitter and social media to absolutely implode,
Yes.
because you're not going to be seeing Michael
Yes.
Burrows, you're not going to be seeing Luis Ortiz. But they kind of seem to have a plan going into the season for those guys,
Mhm.
and you wouldn't think that one pitcher going down would cause that much of a ruckus. But if it was Velasquez, if it was, I don't know, if it was somebody else other than JT, maybe JT and Mitch, if it was one of those two, that causes a lot of chaos within this. So I mean, they're going to have to figure something out here, and it's not going to look like the rotation that I think I gave like either a C or a C plus to.
Mhm.
Um, it could look like a C minus to a D if you're not getting the innings from those guys. And I have a lot of question marks with the bullpen. And now, when you take away Oviedo, who could have, either been the part of that 6-man rotation or that piggyback, I mean, you're going to
Mhm.
be asking for a lot more innings from guys who, Will Crowe struggled, Dwayne Underwood Jr. has struggled, and those are like kind of like your 2 long men. What if they struggle? What if a starter struggles? I feel like there's a little bit more answers with JT in that rotation, in the bullpen with Robert Stevenson, who we were looking forward to seeing, and also Harleen Garcia, who, was gonna be a guy who had performed well in San Francisco for the past couple years, and that you could almost kind of count on to be, a 7th, 8th inning guy. Man, I don't know. It could go. I want to look at the Pirates record here at the end of April after this long stretch, and not want to, get sick to my stomach and throw up.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, and also with the idea of a 60-day IL for a guy like Brubaker, I guess if you want to simplify that in terms of how big of a deal that is, with a 5-man rotation, he would be pitching 12 times. Just like, let's just make that a general assumption. Let's just say he goes 5 innings, those 12 times. That's 60 innings pitched that you're missing from a guy that you can trust. You know you can trust JT Brubaker. Can you trust Johan Oviedo just yet? It's a big deal. And I think this also opens up the door now, especially with Stevenson and Garcia being down. I think this really opens up the door now for one of these starting pitchers that the Pirates like that they have at their disposal, be it an Osvaldo Bido, be it Luis Ortiz, be it whoever that you want to bring up. I could see one of those guys doing kind of the Rowanzi thing from last year and moving to the bullpen and being a long relief option just so that Will Crow and David Bednar and some of these reliable bullpen arms don't throw their arm off by May like we've seen the last 2 years, because that's going to be very, very big. I think people forget how many innings need to be pitched in a major league season. It is a lot. And that's not even counting if a game goes to extra innings. It's not counting if a game blows up in your face from your starting pitcher and your bullpen has to throw 7 or 6 innings in a game. There's a lot to think about here, but it's something that at least today, Craig, we don't have to really worry about with Mitch Keller on the bump, which we will talk about here in just a moment as we get into the Cincinnati Reds and the Pittsburgh Pirates battling today, Saturday, and Sunday. And if you want to bet on these games, and you're a betting person, always do it responsibly, by the way. Go to FanDuel Sportsbook and make every moment more at FanDuel.com/locked on. You got tons of stuff to bet on. You can bet on baseball. You can bet on today's game. The over-under is 8.5. On the Locked On Reds crossover, I said under. I think Mitch Keller and Hunter Green are going to have a very good outing and a very good matchup against each other in the youngest starting pitching matchup on opening day. It's going to be very fun to see those two go to work. But you also have the Final Four this weekend. Do you think the Cinderella Florida Atlantic can win the whole thing? If you want to, go to FanDuel and bet on it right now because it is America's #1 sports book. That's because right now FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet, and then you can wager on everything you want to, from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the nets this weekend. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today, and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Also, you guys saw my NL Central preview yesterday. Make sure you go check out the MLB preview series. We have breakdowns of every single division. And there was a question there, Craig, that we asked, is this really just the Cardinals and everybody else? And there was some good banter about that, about how the Cardinals pitching staff, a lot like the Pirates now with some of the news that we've gotten, is very suspect. Could a team creep up on them? That's a big question. But again, it's opening day. And I'm sure, Craig, you can attest to this like I do too. Every team is 0-0. Every team has optimism. Every team has things that they want to see from their team on opening day, especially, but the opening series in general. Today we get Mitch Keller versus Hunter Green. I think it's going to be a very phenomenal matchup between them. And I think the only unfortunate thing here for opening day is that the Reds, unlike the Pirates, are going 3 youngins for the whole series, which is arguably their 3 best pitchers, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Graham Ashcraft. But when you look at this series from a microcosm, I think there's a strong argument to be had that you could say the Pirates on paper are a better team. Now, what I will say, FanDuel does have Cincinnati favored in this matchup. We'll just take that what it is. Cincinnati opening day is always a big spectacle. I think they said they were expecting 200,000 people. So, I mean, for the block party and everything. But when you go into the series, Craig, what is the biggest thing that you're looking for from this Pirates team for the first 3 games? I know it won't mean much after this, whatever. But starting the season, what do you want to see from this team through these first 3 games?
I mean, the first thing you want to see is a strong start from Mitch Keller. He's performed well in spring training, has like Yu Darvish level of pitches at his disposal at this point in time. I mean, maybe not 10 like you, but he's got at least 6 or 7 that he can kind of throw in there. The big thing for me has been the drop in his whip during this spring training. I think that Chris and I said yesterday that it was, it's below 1. And he's been like a 1.34 last year as a starter towards the end of the season. So wanting to see him keep guys off base, if he's giving up contact, the soft contact, a little bit more swing and miss. So to me, it's like just a big start from Mitch. We know that Hunter Green has the ability to shut down pretty much any lineup he goes against. The kid stuff is electric. What I would want to see there is a continuation of Ke'Bryan Hayes's spring into opening day and into the opening series, making hard contact, but also, pulling the ball more, getting out in front of the ball a little bit more, maybe a nice little home run into that, short porch over there in left field would be something that would be nice to see. I'm also looking at O'Neal Cruz, who's shown, much more patience at the plate, not striking out, kind of picking his pitches to swing at stuff that's like within his zone, which his zone is huge, but not taking a lot of those things that we've seen those pitches off the plate that he can take out. And he has done that, but those are also the ones that he swings and misses at a lot as well. So I'm looking at, those 3 guys, because I mean, if you look at it outside of Reynolds, we don't, we haven't not talked about that news, but, you've got Ke'Bryan Hayes locked up. You've got, O'Neal Cruz here for at least, I mean, I'm not going to say anything, but I mean, you got like 6 years of, or more of control of him here. So you have that. So you're looking at these guys, and Mitch Keller, at least, he's this year, arbitration's got 2 more years of arbitration, but is still young enough that, I mean, people are talking about who would you extend next. Keller would be somewhere on my list, especially if he starts out strong at the beginning of this year, before he kind of prices himself out of Pittsburgh and becomes one of those, $20 million a year pitchers. But yeah, you're looking at that young, you're trying to build that core. I'm looking at big things from those guys. It's not that there, isn't other stuff that I'm looking at. How much playing time in this first series that Kanan Smith and Jigba gets, I'd be looking at as well. Obviously, they're going to give the nod probably to more towards Joe and Andrew, just because, I mean, Andrew, obviously, folk hero here in Pittsburgh, but also showing, that, Joe's, he's done it for at least a couple years in the majors. But I do want to see, Kanan Smith and Jigba, he's earned, that spot. I don't want to see these guys sitting on the bench. I don't want to see, G1 Bay sitting on the bench as much. And another guy to mention is, what does, Rodolfo Castro do? Going up against Hunter Green today, he's hard throwing righty. So, that's who Rodolfo Castro has kind of struggled against during this time. So just looking to see, Castro's been working his butt off. It hasn't seen the results during spring training, but like you said, everybody's 0-0 and everybody's batting average is .000 as you start the season today. So I want to see those guys get off to kind of some quick starts just to have, just something to build upon going into Boston, and then especially, coming back home to Pittsburgh, where they will be playing my wife's White Sox. So that will be fun for everybody. So, but yeah, just want to see these young guys get off to some strong, spring, to build from spring into the first games of the season. And the guys that did struggle, Reynolds didn't have a great spring, especially like a Jack Sawinski. I mean, there's so much to look forward to over this next, this series, this week, this month. that's going to start to tell us a lot about how, this season could go. There's a lot of guys that are slow starters. We've seen it from Reynolds, even over, the past couple years when he's had, good seasons. He's not always, hot out of the starting block. McCutchen is a notorious slow starter in the season. Yeah, man, there's so much to be looking at. And also, what is this JT, Brubaker storyline going to do? And how does the bullpen hold up? And how are they used over, this week or so? Man, there's just going to be a lot going on.
Oh, yeah. And I agree with everything you said there, too. And to add to what Craig said, which was a lot already, if you're watching this opening series and you're saying you don't have anything to watch, just say that in your head again in the mirror. Say it to yourself in the mirror. There's a lot to watch. Because even if I'm adding on top of what Craig just said, there's a lot to be considered here. One of the big things that I'm going to consider, because I'm very confident about the Pirates today, I'll call it out and say it'll happen today. I want to see what David Bednar can do coming off of this injury-riddled season he had last year. I want to see if the Pirates are up 1 in the bottom of the 9th inning at Cincinnati today, if they go to him and he goes out there and looks like his old self. That's going to be something that's going to be very big for that bullpen too, to know that they can go to him in those big spots where normally when he was injured last year, you saw blown leads happen. You saw things like a Yankee Stadium happen when Will Crow blew that game in Yankee Stadium last year. You saw those kind of things happen because David Bednar was not there. But an injury like that, especially to a closing pitcher, is always worrisome. It's something that you have to keep your eye on. So I'd love for the Pirates to be in a position like that today where one-run game, Bednar's out there for the bottom of the 9th inning. It's his job to lose or win. There you go. I want to get that out of the way. And I know it's just one game, but it would be a big confidence boost for somebody like him to do that. And also the rest of the bullpen too. How does Dwayne Underwood Jr. look this year? With all the injuries, how do some of these guys like Jose Hernandez, who they get in the Rule 5 draft, how is he going to have an impact on this roster throughout the year to make sure that these guys don't throw their arms off? To go back to the position players, I agree with you on Kanan Smith and Jigba. Are we going to see a lot of him this weekend, or is he going to be more of just a plug-and-play guy on days off, which I don't want to see? I also think it's going to be interesting, too, that you mentioned a lot of the young guys, but I do want to see how the gel works between the young guys and the veterans. I want to see if Carlos Santana and G-Man Choi, Austin Hedges, and a lot of these guys that they brought in are actually going to be quality veteran players for this team. Now, obviously, the first 3 games aren't going to speak to that, but it would be nice to see Carlos Santana put one over the fence just to say, hey, I know I'm 36 years old, but I can still hit one over the fence. G-Man Choi defensively at first base. I want to see what he can do over there. Austin Hedges, I think, is a big deal for this team. I know a lot of people are upset with his offensive production, but it's going to teach these young pitchers a lot more than we think it is going to with him behind there. And then I loved what you said about Castro too. His job isn't safe anymore. It's not like last year where he was just there. If he doesn't perform well over the beginning of the season, I think there's a high likelihood you see a guy like Ji-Hwan Bae or Connor Joe or somebody like that could slide back and forth that will eventually make their appearance there. So there's just so much to talk about, Craig. There's so much to think about for the first 3 games. And it's like, obviously, it's not going to mean much in the grand scheme of things. But I agree with you 100%. You want to get off to that quick start. And me and Gary, of course, did our predictions on Monday. We both think that the Pirates are going to take 2 out of 3 here. We think that they can get after some of these young pitchers that the Cincinnati Reds have. Obviously, with Hill and Velasquez going, you get a veteran-like presence going on in the final 2 games. Where do you sit as far as how this series will go for the Pirates in terms of wins and losses?
I'd have to say that, the goal has to be to take 2 of 3 from a team that is either, quote unquote, your equal because you finished with the same horrible record last season. And, you're kind of in the same boat as far as, the young guys, wanting to take over a series. They do have some veterans as well, but it's a big thing for them to, more than likely not have Joey Votto to start the season. That's a huge deal for them because that's just like a constant and somebody that you could usually count on. I think you have to that's where you want to take these, like one series at a time and kind of look at it and say, okay, this is a Reds team that we should be able to beat. We need to start taking at least 2 of 3, from, that caliber of competition.
Mhm.
When you look at, you're going to be going into Boston, as the next series before we talk again, you got to be looking and saying, you know what, we might only get 1 of 3, but a victory would be to get, 2 of 3 again, because Boston has been a team that's, underperformed, especially like the last couple years, that you were looking for more from them. You don't know where they're at, if they're rebuilt. I don't know what's going on in Boston,
I don't
because
think
they let
anybody
guys go.
does.
They let guys go, and then they sign guys to huge deals. I mean, I know they think they can't sign everybody, but I mean, I think they have the mind to do that. And I just wanted to go back to with Bednar. I mean, that's when he is on, he is one of the top 5 closers in all of Major League
Yes.
Baseball. The problem is that back has started to act up, at different points during the last 2 seasons. I mean, he hasn't had a full season here in Pittsburgh. And I don't, here's the thing is he's a Yinzer just like the rest of us. I don't want to speak bad about the man, but at some point in time, you have to be there for the entire season. And you also have to trust that the manager is not going to put him out there for 50 pitches all the time and be called upon for that. You're talking about the bullpen with like a Colin Holderman who performed well for the Mets, but it was an extremely small sample size. I think it was like around like 17 innings where he had just over, a 2.00 ERA. Looked really good, but then he comes here and kind of gets blown up, gets injured, is out for the season. What are you going to see from him? Unfortunately, Yerry De Los Santos, you saw, him go down to AAA because he wasn't able to get that velocity back up coming off of an injury, from the end of the season. So there's a lot more question marks that have, kind of developed, over spring training that maybe weren't there before. I mean, if you were thinking about, if you looked at it on paper and you saw, David Bednar, Holderman, Yerry De Los Santos, you saw Harleen Garcia, you saw, Will Crow looking, trim and it probably in really good shape. You had a lot of, more confidence in what those guys can do. But then you see Crow just go out and get blown up a couple of times. Harleen Garcia go down. Yerry De Los Santos not come back. So it changes the state of the bullpen. You talked about, a Rule 5 pick who, his first couple, appearances in spring training, you're like, man, that guy throws fast. He throws hard, that slider, but then he, has trouble with command, which is something that's why he was, the age he was and in Double-A. And it, part of it is, with the Dodgers system and, the plethora of, of prospects they have there, but also it's just, he couldn't, harness the command and control at long periods of time. Man, I'm looking forward. I know it's not going to come, right away here. Now it's not going to come till we get to Boston, but, Johan Oviedo's first start, at times has looked absolutely electric and unhittable with his fastball, with his curveball, with his slider, throwing in the changeup there. But I mean, the thing with him is the same reason St. Louis. I mean, if we're going to praise St. Louis for, how they develop prospects and different stuff, I mean, they moved him to the bullpen, not because they didn't think he was a major league capable pitcher. It was because once he got to, that third and fourth inning as a starter, and we saw that even in the last couple spring training outings, the stuff wasn't as crisp and he would start to hang it and it was getting crushed. So luckily he's not pitching in Cincinnati because I mean, some of that stuff could be taken over. But I mean, a lot of people say the Green Monster. I mean, the Green Monster, if you get up in the air, man, that thing's going over. So want to definitely see, a solid start from him because, I mean, he's excited about it. But man, you're excited about it and you get your opportunity here, you got to take it because, like you said, Ethan, it's you have Ortiz, you have Burrows, you have possibly a Beto. They're going to give those guys those shots. And your leash may not be as long as it was before. You don't have Jared Eichhoff coming in to
No.
start a game here this year. You have a lot of guys that, will be given opportunities. And so, and you have a lot of guys with options on, here that could be, sent down at some point in time. So I don't know, man. I'm excited. I just want to, like I said, positive stuff here for this. Mitch, go out and shove today, brother. O'Neill, poke one out. Kutch, if you get a chance, hit one out. Whoever it may be, Reynolds. I keep on, if everybody sees me looking down, I'm looking for the thing to say that our man's been locked up, because that will be, a huge way. Last year, we got to start the season with our phones blowing up with the Keep Ryan Hayes news. So, hope springs eternal. Opening day is another time where it's just like, you're just happy to have meaningful baseball back as a fan, and hearing Ethan 5 days a week now for the rest of the season talking about your Pirates, man. I am like, I'm on cloud nine here, dude. Yeah, I'm probably not going to work today.
Oh, yeah. And also, I think it was funny that about 2 months ago, when all the Brian Reynolds stuff started, I literally sat there and said, let's not forget the Key Brian Hayes was extended the day before the season last year. What are we glued to on our phones today? I'll let you leave that to yourself. Guys, thank you for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast today for the second episode of the day. Hope you enjoyed the Locked On Reds preview and the NL Central preview from yesterday. By the way, I will have the game recap article up on Bucs Basement, where Craig and Gary are doing phenomenal work along with the rest of the crew. On top of that, I will also have a small YouTube Shorts game recap coming out after the game as well. And then, of course, we have our episode tomorrow. So, guys, thank you so much. Craig, enjoy opening day. I know I will. Head to Twitter for both of our Twitters as well. I'm sure we'll be talking about it all day. Guys, have a wonderful opening day, and I will see you on the flip side.